this video, I want to talk about the battle for Trump's brain. Like, what's actually going on behind the scenes and how is he being pulled different directions? Now, this is my three big story segment. So I'm going to start with a couple other stories just to lead in just what's going on. And then we're going to spend most of the time talking about why he is pulled this way and then that way and says this thing and then says that thing to help you understand what's going on in context. Now, I'm not doing this to defend Trump and I'm not doing this to tear him down. I'm trying to help you understand what's going on. All right, so let's start here with this. This is a leader. Look at this, Zelensky, walking freely among his own, mourning after the terrible strike the other day in Kyiv. Cowards hide in bunkers and bomb others far away. Zelensky's a leader. He's there. He's shown up on the front lines multiple times, and he's not just doing this. He's actually working on other things to make sure that, like, when you're a leader, your job is to resource your people, make sure that they have what they need so that they can do the work, not to do it yourself. Although as a figurehead, he needs to be there as a figurehead, but to also make sure that they have stuff. So, for example, we launched the Build with Ukraine program. This summer, we'll sign agreements to begin exporting our defense technologies, opening production lines in partner countries. So they have become a world leader in defense production, and these weapons will be made for both them and us. We're talking drones, missiles, and potentially artillery. Now, this is reverse the polarity. If they had taken things to build from other countries in Ukraine, now they built them better, and now they're exporting them. Not just exporting them into other countries, but they're making them in-house in, say, European countries that are trying to spend more on GDP now on defense than before. So, and then they can potentially receive some of these from those countries. It's beautiful. It's very smart. That's what leadership looks like. And this was yesterday, not yesterday, last night, but the day before. What would have been unthinkable a few years ago is now routine. Several Ukrainian drones successfully attacked a Russian drone factory located in Dubna, 115 kilometers from the Kremlin. This is a smart move by Ukraine. There may be more to this attack at first seems, but they're doing these kind of things regularly. Russia can't stop them. Russia's size is a detriment to the war. Like, they can't defend everything. Meanwhile, here's another leader. Putin says the whole of Ukraine is ours in theory. And he's talking about how Ukrainians and Russians are one people, but how are you treating your one people? Like, you could have wooed them, but instead of wooing them, you just had to use hard power to try to make them knuckle under. If you had just drawn them into your orbit by being nice, working together, working out a plan, not talking about Ukrainians as if they're second class or lower citizens, people on the outer lands or people that are little Russians or that sort of thing, but that's not the way that he rolls. That's pretty bad leadership. And what goes on in Russia is pretty funny. The work was completed on time, says this reporter. The asphalt has been laid. The roadway is open to traffic. This is a good example of the implementation of a national project. This is the kind of thing, look at the road down here. This is the kind of thing that happens all the time with this kind of bad leadership. Yeah, it's just covered up. It's all smoke and mirrors. It's made up. You can even see this before it blows away over on this side. It's not, it's not visible. So, okay, so there's two spectrums. So where's Donald Trump in this? And before we talk about this, this is important. Like, we're going to be talking about what's going on in the Middle East as part of what's going on in Trump's head, and it's important if you care about Ukraine to understand what's going on between Israel and Iran, because it's affecting it. Like this: Middle East tensions derail EU plan to slash Russian oil price cap aimed at squeezing Russian war funding. So the reduction from $60 to $45 per barrel was postponed after G7 countries agreed that the situation is too volatile. Well, Trump didn't sign on, and so he's part of that package so the situation is, what Trump is doing is too volatile, but this would have been a good move, and it just has gone to the back burner, just like the Senate bill has gone to the back burner for now. Okay, so there was a headline here yesterday in Nexta: Trump may strike Iran as early as today, from Al Arabia. The U.S. president has held a national security meeting focused on Iran. Meanwhile, videos are going viral on social media showing American troops being served steak and lobsters. What? Steak and lobsters? Why? This is a long-standing military tradition believed to signal that soldiers are being prepared for deployment to a combat zone. It's like a final really good meal before they're sent off to wherever they're being sent off to. So that's like an indicator, a sign, right? Okay. Now, Trump wants to be the president of peace, and that he always talks about, I just want the fighting to stop, but there are ways to get there, and there are ways not to get there that look like there are some ways to get there. Okay, this is the guy that does Vantic Soup. That's who I'm reading this post from. Apparently, the rumor that Trump wants a Nobel Peace Prize just because Obama has won one is true. Of course, Obama's prize was never deserved. That's true. He got a Nobel Peace Prize just for being elected. Like, that's kind of lame, right? But and no, that's great. I'm glad he's the first black president. That's okay. But you got to do something to earn the prize. And Obama actually kind of let things fester with Russia and Ukraine and didn't do anything. And okay, but now Trump is making delusional claims in hopes of getting one too. And Trump doesn't deserve one here, but he's going to go on this rant. I just making sure I looked this up on Truth Social just to make sure that this was actually Trump and not some kind of fabrication. So sure enough, Trump posted this. I'm very happy to report that I have arranged, along with Secretary of State Marco Rubio, a wonderful treaty between the Democratic Republic of the Congo and Republic of Rwanda in their war, which was known for violent bloodshed and death, more so than even most other wars, and has gone on for decades. Representatives from Rwanda and the Congo will be in Washington on Monday to sign documents. I won't get a Nobel Peace Prize for this. I won't get a Nobel Peace Prize for stopping the war between India and Pakistan. I won't get a Nobel Peace Prize for stopping the war between Serbia and Kosovo. I won't get a Nobel Peace Prize for keeping peace between Egypt and Ethiopia. A massive Ethiopian dam built stupidly financed by the United States of America substantially reduces the water flowing into the Nile River. I won't get a Nobel Peace Prize for doing the Abraham Accords in the Middle East, which will unify the Middle East for the first time in the ages. No, I won't get a Nobel Peace Prize no matter what I do, including Russia, Ukraine. Well, I wish he would fix Russia and Ukraine and actually get a Nobel Peace Prize. I'd be all for that if he actually armed Ukraine so that they could bring Russia to the table and stop the war. He's not doing it that way, though. And Israel, Iran, which it looks like he might be weighing in on Israel to help defeat Iran, whatever the outcomes may be, but the people know, and that's all that matters to me. Okay, so no, he wants a Nobel Peace Prize. So, but he wants it, and he doesn't, his impulse tends to be a don't go to war kind of impulse. But it's a little different with Iran, and we'll talk about that in just a moment. Trump says the U.S. shouldn't match the 5% defense spending target that he demands from his NATO allies. Now, he was demanding 2% for a decade, and they finally just now all got to 2% or more. He told journalists that the U.S. supported NATO for so long, and he previously covered almost 100% of the costs. Well, the U.S. did carry NATO. I mean, honestly, for much of their funding came from the U.S. Meanwhile, Russia spends 6.2 to 6.3% of GDP on defense, the highest since the Cold War, while waging a war in Ukraine, underscoring why NATO is pushing members beyond the 2% benchmark to 3.5 or even 5%. But Trump is not at all interested in moving that needle up for the United States. Okay, now, this is really interesting. This is a little bit by William Spaniel. I might just do a whole video on just what he was talking about here before we get to this point, because he's really laying out a significant case for what's going on with NATO, or what needs to be going on with NATO. So let's hear what he has to say here.
Back during the Cold War, you may recall that the United States operated under a two-war construct. The idea that it should always have enough military force to handle two conflicts simultaneously. It cost the United States a whole lot of money, but it served a purpose. It prevented the start of one war triggering another war through the domino effect. Well, then the Cold War came to an end, and U.S. military power has slowly eroded to the point where it definitely is a one-war construct.
Okay, so when people are saying, why doesn't the U.S. support Ukraine? Doctrinally, military doctrine is we should not be involved because we cannot actually be involved in there and keep our eye on what's going on with China simultaneously. We have a one-war potential ability, and we can do that one well, and we can't get bogged down in a second front.
If we jump ahead to NATO's 2014 Wales Summit, you started to get a pushback. It was the site of the declaration that 2% of GDP should be spent on defense, which is today's status quo.
That was 11 years ago.
Part of the goal there was to give NATO as a whole a two-war construct, specifically designed so that increased European defense spending could handle a conflict with Russia, while the United States would handle security affairs in the Indo-Pacific. Remember, this was the era of the attempted Obama pivot. The problem for today is that the scale of the potential conflicts has increased. 2% of GDP may not be enough to cover the situation. Trump's foreign policy frames itself as a prioritization imperative, where this time the United States is really pivoting to Asia.
And that's for real. I mean, like that the pivot to Asia is part of American military doctrine right now. And I've talked to a number of military people who think that we'll actually be in a hot war with China unless something changes within the next 2 years. And so that's where America is focused right now and gearing up toward that kind. And that's a different war than you'd have in a land war in Europe. Right. So that's what's going on here. But so Trump is not willing to go to 5% spending here while he's demanding that of others in NATO. NATO needs to pick up the slack. That's the way that he's thinking about this. OK, now, what else is going on? Because there's almost like this bipolar kind of way of thinking. He's thinking this, but he's thinking that, but he's thinking the other thing. And part of this depends on who his advisors are. And part of it is I'm not sure exactly he knows exactly what he's going to do until he's going to do it. He doesn't have an ideological compass that works the same way as a Barack Obama did on one hand or Reagan did on the other. Okay, your intel, this is Timothy Milovanov. He's the former Minister of Economy of Ukraine and the president of the Kyiv School of Economics. And he's saying, question, your intel, and he's posting what Trump is saying. So I'm just showing you the question and answer rather than hearing Trump. Your intel says there's no evidence that Iran is building a nuclear weapon. Trump replies, well, then my intel is wrong. Who said that? Your director of national intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard. Trump, he's wrong. Oh, okay. So that's who he put around him, he doesn't necessarily trust. Okay, you've made progress toward Ukraine peace deal, but Senators Graham and Pompeo was actually the former Secretary of State, I believe, were in Ukraine urging them to keep fighting. Thoughts? Trump, we'll see. People have to be careful with what they say. Their mouths can get them into a lot of trouble. Okay. Question. Iran says that you're serious about talks. You'll tell Israel to stop airstrikes. Will you? If you're serious, you'll tell Israel to stop the airstrikes. Trump says, hard to ask when someone's winning. We're ready to talk. We're speaking to Iran. Let's see what happens. So he's non-committal, but he doesn't seem to be saying everybody's got to cease fire just like he's saying with Russia and Ukraine. He just, we'll see what happens. But it's not the same. Everybody needs to stop this bloodbath. Okay. Next question. Do Europeans help at all in talks with Iran? Trump, no. Iran doesn't want Europe. They want us. Europe can't help on this one. That's an interesting answer. Iran doesn't want Europe? What does it matter what Iran want? Like, how does that? Okay. It's very different than the way that he's handling what's going on in Ukraine. Question. You opposed war in Iraq over bad intelligence. How is Iran different? So that was 20 years ago, right? Trump. Iraq had no weapons of mass destruction. I knew it then. Iran is different. It's close to a nuclear bomb. We can't let it happen. Okay, so let's unpack this. Trump had no weapons of mass destruction. We know that now, but we didn't know that at the time. He says he knew it then. But, I mean, all the intelligence agencies and like America and Britain and other places thought that they had it. And to his point, Saddam Hussein was actually saber-rattling, saying he did. Iran is different. It's close to a nuclear bomb. He could possibly know that. If he does, he needs to make the case and let us know what he knows. And we can't let that happen. I said, don't go into Iraq. If you do, keep the oil. They didn't. Okay. Next. Can you support a ceasefire during negotiations? Trump, maybe. Depends on the situation. Hard to stop when one side feels that it's winning. Israel's doing well. Iran isn't. That makes ceasefire tough. Huh. Now, translate that to Ukraine and Russia. Russia feels that it's winning, and that makes a ceasefire tough. They're not wanting to come to the table. Okay. Gates said that if you brokered nuclear inspections in Israel and Iran, you could win a Nobel Peace Prize or a Trump Peace Prize. Thoughts? Trump says, I should get the Nobel for Rwanda, Congo, Serbia, Kosovo, India, Pakistan, and the Abraham Accords. Actually, the Abraham Accords were really big. This was a significant change in the Middle East, but they won't. Only liberals get it. Okay, well, but that's the way that Trump is seeing the world, and that there might be something to that. It might be, let's say that it's slanted. Still, I mean, if he brought peace in Ukraine and like real peace, real just peace in Ukraine and Russia, I can't imagine a scenario where he wouldn't get it if he were to bring that. But he's not bringing that. He's extending it by his actions. Would you support Iran having civilian nuclear energy capabilities of 3.76%? That's a very small enrichment from the 235 to 238. It's a very small enrichment as opposed to 60%, which they are apparently massing, and they need 90% for a nuclear bomb. Trump's reply was, they sit on one of the world's biggest oil reserves. I don't see why they need nuclear power for anything civilian, which is an interesting question. Why do they need it? They're just trying to move toward a nuclear weapon, so they can be kind of like what Russia's doing. Question, do you worry that striking Iran would undermine your image as a peacemaker? Trump's reply, I'm always a peacemaker. Like, he really sees himself that way. I'm always a peacemaker, though sometimes you need toughness to make peace. Okay, so it's like a walking mass of contradictions. Our question was, Prime Minister Netanyahu says that Israel can take out all of Iran's nuclear facilities. If so, what role would the U.S. play? Trump's reply was that they have limited capacity, can break through a little, but not very deep. We'll see. Maybe it won't be necessary. Maybe. But he's talking very differently about this conflict than he was talking about what was going on in Ukraine and Russia, which is unfortunate. He deals with these two things very differently. Now, he's being pulled different directions by the hawks one direction and by the MAGA peace isolationists on the other hand. This is one of his key advisors who's in that MAGA isolationist camp. Let's listen to this for just a moment.
Yeah, and that's where I think we have to, this is a reason why President Trump received 77.3 million votes and 312 electoral votes and won such an overwhelming show of support in the election this last fall. We have to trust in our commander-in-chief. And we saw in his first 4 years in office, President Trump kept us out of all new wars. There's an important point here that sometimes
that language has shifted, not just kept us out of wars, but kept us out of all new wars, so they can be factually correct that like they didn't like, okay, Ukraine was ongoing throughout this, but that wasn't a new war. That's what he's trying to say.
With the peace through strength, sometimes you have to show a little strength to avoid having to get into a war, because in a certain case, if we don't take care of it now, it could be something later. But if there's one person who can stop us from being embroiled in a war, it's President Trump.
Okay, so with that, we also see things like this. And Alexander Dugin, I generally find him to be questionable. I show you him to say, hey, here's what the Russians are thinking. But he actually got this right. Trump is a trust, or you could say a conglomerate, right? Main shareholders are American populism, that's MAGA. Then you have right tech like Musk and Thiel, and the tech bros, that's another group within Trump land. And then you have neocons, that's like older school conservatives that, well, Harris, it wasn't a great option from their point of view. Rhinos, that is Republican in name only. That's the moderate types that are Republican, but they don't necessarily, sign on to conservative kind of things. They're called Rhinos, Republican in name only, previously anti-Trump. APAC and anti-interventionalists, real far right, not a liberal insult. There are people that consider themselves very far right, and then dark enlightenment, or you could call them alt-right or whatever. And so there's this different coalitions within the Trumpian sphere, and that's a really interesting observation. And they're all at odds with each other. Like, the closest that I would consider myself, this neocon thing, I call myself a Reagan Republican. I'm closer to that than anything else that's in there. I consider myself a Republican, but I find MAGA to be very wrongheaded, and I don't support that. So because the populists are looking at things very differently, but Trump's trying to hold this coalition together, and he's pulled different directions by different advisors. So that was interesting to understand. Okay, this is General Ben talking about what was going on in Israel and Iran, talking about how we should not touch anything that looks like regime change. So this is Ben Hodges. Let's listen to what he has to say.
I'm very concerned right now that the Trump administration has not clearly identified its strategy for what is the outcome that we want vis-a-vis Iran. None of us wants to see this regime stay in power, but it's still a violation of international law just to attack another sovereign country just because you detest their government.
Right. And that's fair, right? We don't want Iran to get a nuclear weapon. Trump personally dislikes Iran because, well, they were trying to assassinate him, among other things. But you can't do this lightly. You need to know what the end goal is. You have to have proof that they're almost about to get a nuclear weapon, and that's why you're doing it. So, okay, just a little bit more.
Or how they treat their people. Clearly, none of us wants to see Iran with a nuclear weapon. So, on the one hand, I'm glad that Israel has done what it did, but it's put in train certain events that could get out of control if the United States does not act responsibly.
Yeah, so we got to be very careful about that sort of thing. And again, Trump's pulled this way by one group, the Tulsi Gabbards and others, and this way by the conservative types like Rubio, like what Rubio actually is in his heart of hearts, not what he says, trying to curry favor with the Trump administration. Okay. And others around the world are paying attention to this sort of thing. Here's Erdogan is preparing for a major war. Turkey ramps up missile production. Yeah, even in Turkey, they're worried about this and thinking, just in case, we better have stuff. Quote, God willing, in the near future, we will reach such a level of defense capacity that no one will even dare to act tough toward us, said Erdogan, quoted in the Times of Israel. Now, it's not likely that Turkey is going to be involved in any war here, but, there's a reason why, say, the Finns and the Poles and the Baltic states are all arming their border or, putting mines and ditches and things along those lines on their border. Same kind of thing, because they're worried about what could come. The Reagan Caucus posted this. A lot of pieces needed to be put in place. Trump might be buying time and the advantage of uncertainty or surprise, but the prediction is this time Trump doesn't chicken out. Well, here we're talking about with Iran. And I think there's more likely action to come against Iran than with Ukraine. It's just he deals with it differently. He's advised by different advisors there. And I'll leave you with this. Darth Putin said, I set auto translate on Donald's text. So 2 weeks comes out as 2 week, W-E-A-K. It's more accurate. But that's what it looks like when he keeps kicking the can down the road on Putin. Inexplicably, if he wants him to come to the table, this is the wrong strategy. But again, he's being pulled different directions. And that's why even in the thumbnail, I have Trump with 3 heads, because which Trump are we getting today? All right, my friends, tell me what you thought about this. Put that in the comments below. I would love to hear your thoughts. Thank you for hitting the like button. That helps this spread. Thank you for the likes, the shares, the subscribes, and thank you for being the kind of person that cares about Ukraine.